Well, hello guys, and welcome back. And today we're talking about The Legend of Korra, Book 1, Air. So, I should say right on the back, I have seen Legend of Korra before. This is not my first time seeing the show. This would be my third with an asterisk, because I've seen the first two seasons twice, and I've seen the third and fourth season once. Because I watched the first two seasons, thought the second season sucked, stopped watching it. Then, after the third and fourth season came out, a year or two later, I went back and I rewatched all four seasons, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it kind of sucked at the time, but upon that second rewatching, I enjoyed it. Is it perfect? No, of course not. But I enjoyed it. And now here we are going back and looking at it again. It just got added to Netflix. And much like the original Last Airbender, I rewatched that and now I'm rewatching this. But instead, I'm going to be breaking it up by season just because I thought it would be easier to do. And at the time I finished the first season and was like, oh, I'll just make the video, get it out. And by that time I get it out, I'll be done with the second season. It took me a little long to get this out, so by the time I'm recording it right now, I have already seen the second season, and I just started the third, a few hours ago. So the second season should be coming within the next, 2 days. Hopefully I can get a quick turnaround on this, but you never know. But I have seen the second season, and boy, do I have some thoughts on it. As do I have some thoughts on this show, on the first season as well. But I should just get right off the bat and say, I did enjoy this. I did enjoy this first season of Korra more than I didn't. Does it have problems? Yes. Are there some things that other people have problems with that I don't? That is also true. Would I recommend this? Yes. But you also have to admit, if you're going to watch this and you're a fan of the original Avatar and you've never seen Korra, you've heard bad things about Korra, because I know when people started talking about Avatar again, there was a lot of hoopla about oh, Korra's not good, right? Korra's a terrible show. Don't watch Korra. And I get that mentality, but I think people were giving it a disservice because, it's not bad. It's not that bad. It's not Avatar, but nothing will ever be Avatar. And once you admit that, you can just have a good time with the show. And I had a good time. But yeah, so let's start at the beginning. Welcome to Republic City. So we get introduced to Korra right off the bat. She's the Avatar. I think people have a problem with this opening scene of her coming out and saying, I'm the Avatar, and then using water, earth, and fire bending. I personally don't. It demonstrates Korra's character in seconds, right? Instantly, oh, we know what Korra is like. And we see that she's got some aptitude towards water, fire, and earth. And the book is called Air because the entire rest of the book is about her struggling with air, which is a nice play off of the first three seasons of Last Airbender, which were water, earth, and fire. So now, boom, here we are. We're doing air. Because then we quickly get a montage, not even really a montage, it's just Korra's grown up. She's now a teenager. I don't remember the age off the top of my head. I don't know if they even ever say it. But yeah, Korra's a teenager and she's been training her entire life. She's mastered water bending, she's mastered fire bending, and she's mastered earth bending. Which, I've never seen the complaint before, but I know statistically it has to have happened because Korra is a female character. Somebody must have called her a Mary Sue. But I think right off the bat here, it explains that no, she spent almost her entire life up to this point learning fire, earth, and water bending. She can be a skilled fighter just right off the bat. Right? It's kind of like with Aang, you learn early on that he's a master airbender. That even at a young age, he literally developed the airball and now he's a master airbender. So he just has to learn the other elements. And unlike Aang, who had a year to learn all the other three, she's been working on them almost her entire life. So I think the Mary Sue complaint's bullshit. I've never statistically seen it, but just based on the fact that she is a female character, it statistically happened. Now, the other complaints about Korra's character, with her being rash, are more valid, because she is rash. She is very hostile. She's a hit first, ask questions later type of person. And if you don't like that, yeah, I don't blame you. I can see how that can be kind of annoying. I personally do like it. I don't love it. Like, I think Aang is probably a better character, but I like Korra as being an antithesis to the Avatar. I think I talked about in my Avatar video about there's been all these memes about Kyoshi and like how, oh, Kyoshi's all about murder. Oh, here I go murdering again. And I found those memes really funny. I know some people don't like them, but I personally found them really funny because they contrast off of Aang so well. Aang is the pacifist who will do anything, right, to keep his passive ways. He won't kill the Fire Lord. But Korra definitely isn't. She's a direct contrast to Aang. I mean, Aang was a little boy and she's a teenage girl. I'd argue that's the exact opposite. And I describe Korra more as a vice than anything else. She really only cares about like having a good time, drinking, partying, sex. Well, okay, she doesn't drink. And while they don't do sex, I mean, there's a lot of romance in this show. But Korra is a character more based in her vices, right? She's more of a sinner than a virtuous. And it's not like Aang was perfect either. And I'm not just talking about the stuff that happens in season 2, but we'll get to that. And yeah. But Korra is she's not a more interesting character, but she's a different character. And I can respect that. I can respect there being different types of Avatar. No one person will do it all the same. Because there's a difference between Korra and there's a difference between the Avatar. Like, and what the Avatar is, what the Avatar represents. Honestly, it kind of reminds, you know, those people where it's like, oh, you find out that like, oh, you'll like a celebrity, and then you find out they're like a massive asshole, and all of a sudden you don't like them anymore. Like, they may do great work, but you don't like them anymore because you know they're an asshole. It's kind of like that idea. Like, people have this idea of like, oh, this is what a celebrity should be. They should be like role models towards people. And the second you find out they're an asshole, that kind of takes away from it. But so people have this idea based on Aang of what an Avatar should be. So when Korra isn't that, they don't like her. And I feel like that's just doing the character a disservice. Again, she has problems, and she's not even within those spectrums. I'd argue she's not perfect. She does make mistakes. I do like, though, I did realize upon rewatching this, she does second guess herself a lot. Like, she'll make a lot of she'll make mistakes, but she'll also second guess herself. We'll get to it in the second season, but there's a lot of points where she's like, should I even be the Avatar? Like, I'm not living up to the Avatar. She has these doubts about herself, and we kind of see it here. And I kind of really like that, right? She's trying to live up to Aang's image in the same way we as a viewer expect her to live up to Aang's image. And she does let us down every once in a while. And while I actually like the growth on her, because she does feel disappointed. Korra cries several times in the show. And I always felt it led towards more character growth and self-realization. But not everyone will. Are they wrong? I don't know. But personally, I thought it was fine. But yeah, so eventually she runs away and she has to go to Tenzin, who is Aang's... Is he Aang's youngest? I think he's Aang's youngest. And I do like the breakout sequence where Katara's like, yeah, you need to go. I support you in this. Yes. How they handle the old cast is interesting. In this season, we see Katara again, and we get a little of her, but she's still pretty good in what we get of her. We see Tenzin, who's Aang's son. We see Beifong. We see the chief of police, Beifong, and she's Toph's daughter. But I know some people want more of the old cast. Like, there's an entire flashback scene where we go back to see Aang, Toph, Sokka, all running the city and whatnot. And I know people wanted more of that. A lot of people want more of Sokka, and Yeah, okay, let's just address it now. Yeah, Sokka's not in this show. I think they mention in this season that he has passed away since then, which sucks, and we don't learn about his kids or anything, and I know Netflix said something, who cares? Yeah, it would have been interesting, yes, but yeah, no, that's all I got. It would have been interesting, but you can't always win. But yeah, so Korra's trying to learn airbending, and as part of her being this character based around like physical action, airbending does not come easy to her. We see her trying to train. She gets frustrated. She gets rash. I like it. I like the dichotomy between Aang. And this, she's not a very spiritual character. Of course, this will come to bite us back in the ass in the end. But I like her struggle with airbending. It's a very different one to what Aang dealt with. And I think that's refreshing, right? It's good to know that Korra, right? We see a lot of times in shows like this where like they fall into the trap of just repeating their predecessors. And there are some elements in this show that are like, oh yeah, right. We can see that in the previous show. They call themselves the new Team Avatar at one point. And it's like, yeah, you can see how Bolin is Sokka or Mako is Zuko. Asami is... I got nothing. I mean, she's got the tech smarts of Sokka, but personality-wise, I don't know where to put her. I also don't know, like, Korra, I guess, would be the most, like, tough, but even still, that's not a perfect match either. Yeah, there are some similarities, but there are also some complete differences here. It's, to use the George Lucas quote, it's rhyming. It's taking what we know and slightly twisting it to do something entirely new. And so, yeah, she's struggling with airbending, and then we get pro bending with, Mako and Bolin. And I like the idea of pro bending. There's this idea in, like, world building that when building a world, you want to know, even if you don't even talk about it, you want to know what your characters do for entertainment. The two easiest way to do this are music and sports, because those are some of the earliest things people come up with. I guess also plays. I guess plays would also be an easy one. But what do your characters do for entertainment? The original show kind of touched upon this. There were, right, when they go to the Southern Air Temple, there's like a game they can play, and they never do it, but there's hints that it's there. And I think there's a few other hints along the way. Like, I remember some earthbending game at some point that they at least talk about. But yeah, in this world, right, we've got Republic City, which we'll get back to in a second. But we've got all three benders living together. You got fire, water, earth, and the few air benders, right, who are living on an island. But you've got the three benders living with a bunch of non-benders. So, of course, right, it's like, oh, now that the war is over, and now we need new stuff to do with our time. We're not all focused on the war. So, hey, so they invent a game where fire, water, and earthbenders have to work together. I think it's a pretty clever idea. Admittedly, I have no idea how the game works. Like, sometimes I feel like, oh, boom, in the first round they win the game, or even with the odds stacked against them, they win the games. And then other times they're like barely scraping by and win. And I don't get it. I admittedly do not get how, like, I felt like they didn't change the rules, but I don't feel like they ever fully explained them, which is a problem. But it was never too bad. Like, I never felt like it fully broke things. Or at least for me. I know for some people, oh, they'll read way too much into it. But I personally felt like, no, I knew just enough about pro bending for it to work. And I like the idea of how, right, it's about the three types of benders working together. And there are certain, like, things that they have to do, and, like, you gotta push your opponents back behind lines and whatnot. Like, they have Korra come in as a newcomer, and that would be a perfect time to explain the rules, and they explain a few, but they also don't get bogged down with the details. They're in a complicated position. But I want to go back to Republic City for a second. I have seen criticism of the show that it's too Americanized. Republic City is clearly based off of, like, New York in the 1920s. And I think that's a really interesting setting, right? Because Avatar was all, right, it was all about the past, right? Like, oh, we've got the Inuits, we've got ancient China, we've got ancient Japan, we've got the monasteries with the monks and whatnot. So this one is taking a more modern approach to it. And I kind of like that. I like that it's doing something just a little different. I know some people will say, oh, well, they spend too much time in Republic City. And in some ways, they kind of do. But again, this is a rhyme of Avatar. So Avatar was all about adventuring the globe, going on this world spanning adventure to learn the bendings. But in here, she's specifically here to learn airbending. And all the airbenders, of which there are 4 of, not including Korra herself, are in Republic City. So that's kind of her only choice. But yeah, no, I think the setting it's an evolution that I think is really interesting. Are there some problems I have with the setting that we'll get to in a minute when we introduce Asami? Yes. But that'll come in a minute. And then so in the 3rd episode, we get introduced to our villain, Amon. Amon's whole shtick, as we find out in the 3rd episode, is he's part of this equalist group. Which is an interesting idea, because in the original show they made a few jokes, Sokka mostly at his own expense, about how he wasn't a bender, that there was all these benders around, but he wasn't one. And so this show asked the question, hey, if benders and non-benders are trying to live in peace in the city, don't benders have a natural advantage? And you even see that with the Triple Threats, which are a gang made entirely of benders. So I get where the villain's coming from right off the bat. I think the design of Amon is a really good one. I like his whole shtick about him the mask. I think the mask looks very good. It's a good design for Amon. It's not intimidating. Well, it kind of is, but it's more mysterious than anything else. I don't know. Personally, I really like the design of Amon. That's just me. But I think his power of him being able to take away somebody's bending. Because we saw, again, it rhymes. At the end of the original show, Aang is able to take away the Fire Lord's bending, and that's how he brings this peaceful conflict. So now there's this new guy, Amon, who's a non-bender, who has the ability to take away somebody's bending. And he's trying to do that in order to bring peace to the world. At least, I mean, he's also trying to presumably install a dictatorship, but who can tell? But I think it's an interesting threat. I like the idea of Amon. I think these first 3 episodes are really strong. They really set up the show. We know, right? We learn everything that's going on. We learn about the pro-bending stuff. We know who Korra is. We know who Mako's Bolin are. We know who the villain is. There's a lot of good setup in these first 3 episodes. I think these first 3 episodes are very strong. And it got me right back into the show. I was interested right off the bat. And I'm not going to say it slows down any after that. It kind of does, but it does. It's not, I'm not saying it becomes like a different show. But I think for the strength of the first 3 episodes, it in some ways lives up to it, and in some ways doesn't. There's a lot of complications along the way. But in the 4th episode, we get introduced to Tarlok in this one. It's Tarlok, who is someone from the, I want to say Northern Tribe. I could be the Northern Water Tribe, who he sees, because now that everyone knows that Amon can take away people's bending, he sees Amon as a threat, so he's trying to team up with Korra to get them to take down Amon, right? And he's kind of our secondary antagonist. I think in theory he's interesting. I don't like where the conclusion gets with him, because as we get near the ending, I kind of feel like the show the ending with like Amon and all that kind of falls apart. But also in this episode, we get introduced to Asami, who Mako runs into, and they start dating almost immediately. And then we have her father, Hiroshi, who sponsors them, right? There's the trope of the generous benefactor. We see it in other stuff, like I think of Wonder Woman off the top of my head, where the councilman comes in, gives them the stuff for their expedition, and then boom, guess what? He's Mars. Yeah, in this, Hiroshi sponsors them But as it turns out, no, he's evil, but Asami isn't. Which it could also totally lead towards Asami's evil as well. Like, she also stands by her father. But I'm glad they didn't. I like the idea of Asami, and I like what they'll do with her in later seasons. For the most part in this season, she's stuck in the love triangle. In the second season, they get a little more out of her, but the love triangle... Okay, so let's talk about the love triangle, because we've introduced Asami. So how it works is Korra likes Mako, Asami likes Mako, and Mako likes Asami, but he's also got feelings for Korra, and it's a fucking mess. And it gets worse in the second season. Like, they add an entire other layer to it. But yeah, right now, Mako is dating Asami, but Korra is interested in him, and they share a kiss at one point in, the 5th episode? Yeah, I think it's the 5th episode. It's a mess, and it can get kind of annoying. In the start of the season, it's mostly not too bad. Like, it's mostly a lot of glimpses from where Mako and Korra are hanging out, especially after she gets kidnapped, and it's mostly just a lot of glances from Asami, and it's like, but it's not too bad. I think it gets a lot worse in the second season. And I mean, admittedly, Korra kissing Mako, that whole scene gets us the 37 dicks thing. Which, if you've never seen it, look up Legend of Korra. I think it's 37, maybe it's 27 dicks. I don't know. Look it up. It's from Clerks or something, but I think it's a really funny video, and it fits perfectly. So we at least got that, which is good. But yeah, the love triangle stuff is a mess. I don't think it's too bad this season, but it can get annoying, especially at the end, because I don't think at the end of the season, I don't think Asami and Mako ever actually break up. I don't think that ever actually happened. It's just next second Mako's dating Korra at the start of the second season, and who cares? Maybe I missed a line. But I'm pretty sure Mako and Asami never actually officially break up. They get in fights here and there, but I don't think they ever officially break up. And then there's Bo Lin's thing where he has a crush on Korra, right? Because his brother's dating Asami, so he wants to get with Korra, and they have fun for a little bit, but it doesn't work out. And because Korra has a crush on Mako, so this is more of a love square. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. So Mako, my main problem, Mako's the Zuko, right? He's the more stoic, hard-ass guy. Honestly, I'm surprised people don't hate him more. I know some people do. I know some people despise Mako because of the love triangle stuff, and I don't blame them. It can be pretty annoying, but Mako, I don't know. I don't really get much from him. Bolin is our funny guy, right? He plays the Sokka. He's the funny guy who gets into funny things. Hey, funny guy, do the funny things. I like Bolin. I like Bolin a lot. He is pretty funny. He's got a good heart, good nature to him. I think he's really fun. I like him. But yeah, so they're doing the whole bending thing, and the team's right there fighting amongst themselves because, to quote Batman, dating in the team never goes well. Oh, God, what a great show. God, I need to watch Justice League Unlimited again. But yeah, I think, they start to suffer because of it, but then they get to the final round of the bending competition, and they end up barely losing. It's mostly pretty good on their side, even though the match is entirely rigged against them. But it's mostly pretty decent. But then they lose, and hey, guess what? Amon shows up. He takes away their bending. There's a pretty decent scene. I like how all these characters work together. I didn't even mention Chief Beifong runs the metal bending cops, and I think they're really interesting. They've got the whole Attack on Titan things of the grappling hooks and whatnot, and that's really cool. And they do some really cool stuff with that, especially here in this scene. and where like Korra and Beifong are working together to try to catch him on. They do some pretty interesting stuff with it. It's the metal bending cops are interesting. Also with the resistance guys, they have like stun rods. There's a guy with a mustache who keeps showing up who's got like stun batons, but they also have gloves that stun people that are like taser gloves. And that's really great. That's a great way of using technology to fight back against villains, right? It's using technology to fight magic. That's a really interesting idea. I really like that. And like this whole thing of, oh, anyone could be a bender, anyone could be a non-bender, so they don't even see the people in the crowd. They just put on masks and take out Beifong and Tenzin for a bit. It's really interesting. The premise behind this season with the benders trying to like rise up against the non-benders has so much potential. It's so interesting, and I have problems with it, especially how it ends. But I think it's so it's such a good idea for like a premise. Like I'm totally invested in it for this next season. So afterwards, we get the new team avatar, which is Korra, Bolin, Asami, and I think I think they all work together pretty well. I think it's all like these four, especially with Asami later on using the Equalist glove to like electrocute people, and she's got the cars, right? Later on, she learns to fly a plane in the second season. I think that's really interesting. All right, I like this new team avatar. They're fun. They're fun. But yeah, so Bolin and Mako are staying at Asami's house, and Korra overhears something from Hiroshi, her father, about how, and like is like, oh, he must be working for the Equalists. Okay, my problem with this, not that he's working for the Equalists. I actually think that's really good, and they did hit at it earlier with like her mother being killed by a firebender, and like a conversation where you learn that Mako and Bolin's parents were killed by firebenders as well. I think. But right, we learn her father's motivation, him being the trope of the charitable benefactor. My problem is how Korra figures it out. Because she overhears a conversation that Hiroshi's having, and the conversation tells her nothing. Like, I could watch that same conversation and be like, oh, that's just a business call, right? Cabbage Corp is taken down because Cabbage Corp gets blamed for helping out the Equalists. And it's like, no, that's just a normal business call. But no, she takes from that and it's like, oh, he must be working with Amon. And they rate all of his stuff and it's like, oh, well, I guess it's nothing. Even though she's right at the end of the day, I don't know. It's really poorly handled in my opinion. I think the idea of Hiroshi working with him is really interesting. And like, they eventually find out about his like secret factory. And I'm like, I'm totally down for that. That's fun. But I feel like the way Korra like gets hinted on it, I wish the conversation was like a little more specific. You know what it reminds me of? Fucking Sherlock. You know, the shitty show with Burgle and Cumberbatch or whatever. In like the final season of that show, at one point like Corvidav Smith admits to like being a murderer or no, it's his daughter, who is actually Sherlock's secret sister he forgot about, tells him that his father, Corvidav Smith, is a murderer. Sherlock accuses him, and then it's like, oh, did he make a false confession? Oh my god, is Sherlock going crazy? And it's like, and then at the end, it's like, oh no, Corvidav Smith is actually the villain the whole time. Yeah, no, he just admits to Sherlock that no, he was the villain. And even though he, like, the confession's all fucked up and came from his secret sister that he totally forgot about, nope, that totally happened. That's kind of what it reminds me of. And if that Sherlock thing if you've never seen the show and that sounded fucking dumb, it is. And this thing, how this happens here is also kind of fucking dumb. Yeah. But they go to his secret lair, and now I don't think until the fourth season, I don't really hear people complain about the technology in the show. Because, right, the original show was mostly ancient, but they had things like air balloons, but the air balloons never felt like too advanced. It also kind of felt like a show that like magic was like, people didn't really need technology that much because the magic of the bending kind of did a lot of the work for them. Yes, they had things like hypnotism and, like I said, the previously mentioned air balloons, but really there wasn't that much technology. So this happens later in the fourth season, but right now, the cars, I think the cars are a perfectly natural evolution. We get planes later on. I think planes are a perfectly natural evolution of the air balloon. But here we have mecha tanks. Like, if it was just a normal, like, World War One style tank, I'd be like, no, that makes sense. But these are, like, bipedal. I mean, they're working on tank treads, but they're, like, bipedal tanks made out of, like, platinum, so they can't be metal bended, and they can, like, shoot grappling hooks. They've got tasers in them. Yeah, maybe it goes a little too far. Maybe these mecha tanks don't match with the rest of the world. I'll give you that. I'm willing to put planes, airships. I think we see trains at a later point. All that perfectly reasonable. All that stuff perfectly reasonable. But this right here with the mecha tanks, yeah, it goes a little too far, and it'll go even farther. Like, but I can see the complaint. Personally, I think it's, again, like the glove thing, it's an evolution of that. Maybe they dialed it a little too far up to 11. Maybe they should have just started off with, like, an Iron Man suit or something. Or, like, an exoskeleton armor. That would have been a little more believable. But these, like, giant mech tanks, I mean, they do kind of look like they fit the world. They remind me of, like, those submarine suits, like the old school ones that I don't think people use, but they might. You never know. They remind me of those a little bit. But yeah, and I like that they're a genuine threat. Like, they take out Korra, they take out Tenzin, they take out Beifong. That's interesting. But yeah, afterwards, they put together they've got Team Avatar together, and they're just trying to get by with life. All the love shenanigans are still going on. It's still, it's still a lot. It really is. But eventually, they all get arrested. Like, Mako, Bolin, and Asami all get arrested because Tarlok's going a little too power crazy, and he's basically trying to persecute all non-benders, basically proving Amon's point. Oh wow, it's almost like we see that shit happen in real life. Oh, remember to vote. If you are an American citizen who is over the age of 18, remember to vote. It is very important. All right, let's get back to it. But yeah, so Korra goes and has a talk with Tarlok, and as we find out, he's a bloodbender. Which, again, right, like the whole thing about taking away the powers, interesting, right? Like taking that to a next step of, like, giving it to a villain, interesting. Bringing back bloodbending, also very interesting. Like, I'm totally down for someone who can, like, bloodbend, especially because, right, it was established that they need the power of the full moon. But here, nope, Tarlok can bloodbend at any time. That's also very cool. And I really like, that's how she defeats Korra. She goes and hides Korra away in the mountains to, like, try to get rid of her. During that time, we get the flashback with Aang, and it's pretty good. The whole flashback with Aang is interesting. I like this Yakone villain. It shows the struggles of them setting up the city, that it wasn't always perfect. They needed, there were gangsters, right? And this guy who has the ability to bloodbend at any time is a genuine threat, even for Avatar Aang. Not in an impossible to beat way, but in a different, it's different than, like, the Fire Lord, for example. Right? It's a smaller level threat, but it bears its own weight nevertheless. I think Yakone is an interesting idea. But it's also kind of the reason the whole show the whole Amon thing kind of falls apart. Because eventually Amon shows up, captures Tarlok, takes away his bending, and the scene with Amon fighting Tarlok and how he just resists the blood bending is still even once you know what's going on, I still think it's fucking cool. Like, seeing, like, Tarlok's blood bending him on and he's just not moving, and he's, like, able to move. It's like, what the hell is this guy? It's great. It's a good scene that really does, like, show the threat that Amon bears. That even bloodbending, this forbidden technique, this super powerful technique, nope, Amon's immune to it. I like that. I like that. Of course, I still think Amon falls apart, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Yeah. Also, meanwhile, the rest of the crew, right? Chief Beifong, Tenzin, Mako, Asami, other one, Bolin, all go looking for Korra. They don't find her. This is where like Asami's like glances at like Mako, like being like mad or disappointed in him. Like a lot of that comes from this, especially once they find Korra, and Mako's like, "Oh, we need to get her to a doctor," and he's like, "Princess carrying her." That's where a lot of that comes from, which makes me think they break up at some point around here, but I don't know. I don't know. And then after that, the Equalists come in and, like, with the help of Hiroshi, they basically come in and take over the city. They use the blimps, right? They've basically been fully decked out with technology, because technology versus bending. And you know, it's also very interesting because they don't fall into the trap of like, oh, we're using technology to fight the benders because our technology is better than your magic in like a spiritual sense. Like they never really delve into the spiritual aspect of bending in this season versus like the technology, right? And like which one is definitively better. Like they never, right, spirit versus modernism or natural versus modernism. They never really dive into that in the show, which I could see some people seeing as a problem. Well, I mean, there was a second book called Spirit, but yeah, we'll get to that. We will get to that. But yeah, they take over and then they go to run away. Asami, Korra, Bolin, and Mako go into hiding. Chief Beifong gets captured, but hey, all the airbenders get away, so that's good. But Amon's basically taken over the city at this point. They also call in the United Military, the United Forces Military, which is supposed to. They belong to the Republic government, right? That's it. They're part of this whole Republic, Republic City and whatnot. He also Amon also captures like all the council members as well. And so that you're right, the United Forces military shows up with the Navy, led by General Iroh, which it's cool. It's cool. I think I remember back in the day people having problems with him just being Dante Bosco, and it just being Dante Bosco again. Personally, I don't really mind. I'm fine with it. Like, hey, it's cool to see Dante Bosco again. It's cool, right? I like it. I think the character's not too bad. Go read Dante Bosco's book From Rufio to Zuko. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But yeah. So yeah, they come in, the military gets their asses kicked. This is where planes show up. Again, I think planes are a good idea, like a natural evolution of what's going on in this world. We see some like benders fighting planes, like Korra takes down a plane or two. It's pretty decent. It's a pretty decent scene. There's a lot of good fight scenes in here. I like the energy this show has. It's basically just a progression of Avatar. I know some people will say, oh, it's not as good, it's not as interesting, blah blah blah, especially with them using a city setting, blah blah blah. No, I like it. I like it. There's a lot of good momentum action. I like right, I've called Korra, right, she's very like angry. She's all about like power. And because of that, like she tends to use firebending more than anything else. Even though she is a waterbender naturally, right? That's the tribe. She comes from the Southern Water Tribe. She tends to use firebending the most, which I think is a good show of her character, right? That really shows like what she's like personality-wise, that she tends to use firebending more than any of the others. But yeah, so after that, they break into right. Amon's taken over Air Temple Island. They break in, they find Tarlok, who's been captured, and he's being held there as prisoner. And this is kind of where the show falls apart for me. I think the idea of Amon is interesting, right? The idea of some normal person who got the ability to take away somebody else's bending. But then you find out Amon is a bender himself. He's a water bender. He's Tarlok's brother. He's named Unalak, if I remember correct. And his father is Yakone. You know, I'm surprised at how good I am I'm doing at remembering these names. Normally, I'm garbage and can only think of like, I'd be able to get like Korra and Mako and that's it. But no, I've got Almost all of them. Oh, wow. Wow, that's never happened before. But yeah, so we find out that he's a waterbender. He's got the ability to bloodbend at any time. And somehow, at some point, he figured out that he can use bloodbending to take away somebody else's bending. Is that ever explained? No. Did it need to be? Probably not. Because during this whole backstory of like him, Tarlok and Unalaq growing up together, you do... Tarlok says that he does believe it when his brother says that all bending is bad. When Amon says all bending is evil, he believes that. And seeing the backstory, I get that as well. I totally believe this idea that where Unalaq got the idea of all bending is evil. Of course, do I think that the fact that Unalaq is a bender takes away from not only his message, which is kind of the which is kind of like the end goal after Korra figures it out. It's like, oh, if we expose him on as a waterbender, well then boom, his whole thing falls apart because he's a liar. Yes, that's entirely true. But I also feel like it takes away from the show. I feel like it would have genuinely been stronger if he got the ability to take away somebody's bending from the lion turtle, kind of like Aang did. Right? If he was someone whose family was killed by a firebender, he was lost at sea, and because of that, right, and he happened to find the lion turtle who gave him the ability to take away people's bending, maybe in a manipulative kind of way, but I feel like that would have made his message stronger, and I feel like it would have made the show stronger. Maybe that's just me. But I do kind of feel like that revealing Tarlok or revealing Amon as a waterbender / bloodbender kind of takes away from it for me. I just feel like the ending kind of falls apart here on Amon's sense, and it falls apart in the other senses as well. Because so Korra goes to confront Amon, and like there's this moment of doubt where he like takes off his mask, and sure enough, he's got the burned up face and whatnot. It's revealed it's all makeup later, but for a second there, it's like, ooh, maybe Tarlok is wrong. Maybe Amon is just this powerful guy, right? Like maybe he's just a non-bender who got for a second, it falls apart almost instantly because eventually Korra and Mako get away. Bolin and Asami are out taking down the airfield, so that way another group of ships can come in that don't matter at the end of the day. Their side quest is entirely pointless. Besides, the only no, that's not entirely true. It does give Asami a chance to confront her father one more time, and that's good. That's a good moment. Is the writing not always that great, especially coming from Bolin? Like, do I feel like Bolin probably shouldn't have been involved at all in this scene? Yes. Do I like this thing with Mako and or Asami and Hiroshi fighting? Yes, that's good. But Bolin, no, he didn't need to be in this. He could have been just off taking care of the other stuff. Because also as part of Amon's threat, right, he's doing this big arena show and he's threatening to get rid of all the airbenders. That's a big threat right there. That's a big threat right there. Is it kind of bullshit that we see Tenzin and his family get away and boom, next scene he's captured? Yes. Yes, it is. And yes, right, because you get Chief Beifong gives up her bending to try to get them away. I know it's supposed to make Amon a bigger threat, but like I said, the show kind of falls apart in these last few episodes. Does it ruin it? Maybe. Maybe. But yeah, no, there are definitely some problems here. And then so Korra and Mako free Tenzin and his family. They go to run away. Amon shows up and he actually uses blood bending, right? They're right. He's able to catch Korra and take away her bending. I actually think it's really good that Korra loses her bending here, right? That Amon is so powerful, he's even able to take away Korra's bending. That's great. And the subsequent scene where she's finally able to use air bending to save Mako is also great. Because the entire show's been building up to it. And I know some people will say that, oh, well, it kind of, like, I can see people complaining that, oh, well, it kind of comes out of nowhere. Or it kind of, like, they feel like, because the entire thing's been building up her doing airbending, but they don't actually feel she's gotten better, even though because they kind of turn away from the whole airbending thing for a little bit. Like early on during the Pro Bending League and whatnot, like Tenzin even points out that, oh, doing pro bending is actually making her a better airbender because it's making her think more strategically. And during the second half of the show, yeah, they kind of move away from it. Yes, we do get that spiritual thing where she connects with Aang, but it kind of loses focus on it for a little bit. But even with that, the scene of her, Amon takes away her bending, and so now she's able to use just air bending, I still think is a great scene. It's got the energy to it that it really needs, and I think it does successfully deliver it. And because there's also this whole thing about like how people don't know how to fight airbenders. Like we skipped over a scene earlier where Tenzin's son... Fuck. I don't remember. Where Tenzin's kids, Jinora and the other two, Jinora, Iki, and I don't remember, but they fight a bunch of like non-benders who show up and try to attack them. And at one point the son uses fart bending, like fart air bending, which I know people have complained about, and it's dumb. But I could also see it. I could totally see it. And I think it comes back later as well, which I can see also people complaining about. The fart bending thing, even in the world the Last Airbender created, I could also see it. The thing is, I don't think it's unrealistic for the original show. That's me. I know other people have different takes on it, and their takes are totally valid. But personally, I don't see it as a bad thing. I think it makes sense, right? It's a natural evolution. Because, yeah, people just don't know how to fight airbenders. I mean, we saw that in the original show where Aang gets captured at one point, and he just straight up says, you guys have never met an airbender before, huh? And then he just kicks their ass. Yeah, so people just not knowing how to fight an airbender makes perfect sense. And then Amon gets thrown into the water, he spirals up, and all of a sudden, everybody knows that Amon's a liar. He's not a bender. And then his whole revolution falls apart. That's dumb. I'll admit that. That's dumb. I don't get why his revolution falls apart. Like, what? Okay, so people see that Amon's a liar, and because he's the figurehead of the revolution, he's the one that matters towards the revolution, right? The revolution is built on him, his image. So the second he's a liar, the revolution is over. The whole conflict, the whole reason this whole thing started was because benders and non-benders weren't happy, right? That because you have things like the triple threats, but now that Amon's a liar, it doesn't matter anymore. All of a sudden, benders and non-benders are equal. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I'll just say it, and I think there's potential to show it off in the next season, in the next few seasons, right? Like, I know in the second season they have like a president and whatnot, right? There's like a president and like the entire structure of Republic City's changed. And I don't think the president's a bender, if I remember correctly. But I still don't feel like it addresses the core issue here. Yes, maybe like, oh, well, if you're a non-bender, you can just buy this electric glove, and now you can protect yourself, right? Or there's the chi blocking stuff, right? Like, you know how, like, there's the trope of, like, dads getting their daughters to take, like, taekwondo so they won't be a victim. In the Avatar world, do non-benders take like chi blocking classes in order to not be victims or whatever? I can see it. There is a genuine conflict here. Just kind of ends, right? Once Amon's revealed as a liar and a waterbender. That's just kind of it. And we're going to see that one more time before we finish this video off. So afterwards, Amon goes and gets Tarlok, and they go to run away, and Tarlok, as they're getting away, Tarlok takes a glove, unscrews the oil cap, and blows up the boat. It's also a pretty good scene. I think, for all the problems, I also think that little moment of, right, Tarlok realizing that, no, this shouldn't be, right, and that's it. That's where it kind of that's where his whole thing ends. But I actually kind of like it. I like that. Oh, it's not just right. Korra doesn't fully defeat him. I think that's more interesting. I think that's I still have all those problems I just talked about, but I think for getting rid of Amon for his death, I think that's a lot better than other things they could have done, especially with their whole setup of him being Tarlok's, or of him being Tarlok's brother. Yeah. And then so now Korra's lost her bending. She goes up north. Katara can't heal her. Nothing can heal her bending. So she goes out to the cliffs right in the South Pole to cry. And that's where the show would have ended. If it had ended right there, I would be like, yes, there are problems, right? I've listed a bunch of them, the love triangle, the whole thing with Amon's ending, the few other things. There were problems, but that wasn't too bad. It's still pretty good, right? If it just ended right there, I'd be like, yeah, no, it's pretty good. And then the entire the second book was called Spirit. I don't know if we knew that at the time, because I have conflating information about whether or not I saw this as it came out. Like, I remember watching the first and second seasons as they came out. Definitely before the third and fourth, but according to what I read somewheres, that's not true at all. I actually didn't start watching the show until it was all over, but I also totally remember the controversies behind everything, because I swear. So with what's about to happen, let me just explain what's happening, right? So I think if it had ended right there, it would have been fine, but it doesn't. So if book 2 was all about her going on the spiritual journey to gain back her other forms of bending, I'd be like, yeah, right, there's a lot of potential here. But then she sheds the one miracle tear. Ugh. And then Aang shows up, which, okay, her connecting to our past avatars, we've kind of already seen it. And yes, the show has been building up to this, right? She's seeing flashbacks through Aang's perspective. So the idea of her actually singing Aang, not a bad idea, right? I get where it's coming from. There are definitely steps, right? Like the airbending thing, it doesn't come out of nowheres. There was definitely stuff that happened that got us to this moment. But the Aang comes in, right? We see all the past avatars. He goes up to Korra and he gives Korra back her bendings. So now she can bend again. Korra, Mako shows up, they kiss, they're now a couple. Then Korra goes and gives Chief Beifong back her bending, and I think that's where the season ends. Yeah, no, I still, yes, there's a lot of stuff. Yes, this didn't come completely out of nowheres. I still don't like it. Nope. I still don't like it. Back in the day, I swear there was a thing where, like, at the time, the creators had asked for, like, 2 seasons, or they had asked for multiple seasons, and Nickelodeon told them yes, so they started production on the first season. Then at some point during the first season, they were told, no, you only get a single season. So that's why Korra ended the way it did. Is that they were told they were only getting 1 season, like halfway through development, so they then retooled the ending so that way it could be a definitive end, right? If they only got 1 season, then they only got 1 season, it was fine, right? It definitively ended on a good note, right? Korra gets her bending back, Chief Beifong gets her bending back, Mako and Korra are together, all's well that ends well. All's well that ends well. But I tried to look it up. I tried to find any evidence I could, because I swear this was the story I heard back in the day. And I couldn't find anything. I did find things of the creators saying that no, this was that when they were making Korra, they had originally only planned it for 1 season, and it was supposed to be a self-contained story. And that's why the ending is the way it is. That no, they originally only had 1 season. It was supposed to be a mini series. They only had 1 season, and they wanted to have a definitive ending. And then they got the other seasons later, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. But it feels wrong. Like, especially with this, you called the second book Spirit, for Christ's sake. I don't know. This just feels wrong, in my opinion. That she just, yes, there are hints to this. This doesn't come out of nowheres. But I would have loved to have seen the second book just dedicated to this. I would have, or not dedicated to this, but even if early on, like only like 3 or 4 things in, she gets her bending back, I would have been right. It would have been something, but that's just not what happens. She gets it back here, and I just don't like it. Does it ruin the show? No, no, no. I still think it's fine. I still, even with everything that happened, even with all my problems with it, and yes, I do love, like I said, love triangle's annoying. Mako, or the Amon thing kind of falls apart in my opinion. The bending thing's never really resolved. The love triangle sucks. This whole ending thing, even with all of that, I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed watching this. I still think it was worth watching again. I like Korra. I like Bolin. I like Asami. I like her whole arc with her father. That's really interesting. I still, in concept, like Amon as a villain. And some of the stuff he does is really interesting. I think he's got a good design and a real threat to him. I like the setting as an inversion of the original show where they're all in one city and we get to explore it. I think that's really interesting. There's probably some shit I didn't even talk about in this. Tenzin's good. Tenzin's whole family I like. Especially, I like Jinora. I like the wife Pema. We don't really talk about her too much, but I think she's pretty funny. Tenzin's whole thing with Lin Beifong, and like how they used to date at one point. That got a good laugh out of me. There's a lot of stuff that I really enjoy here. But there's some problems, and there are some problems, and I could see why people wouldn't like them. But I did. I liked this show. I think as book one goes, it's a strong enough start. Could it have been better? Sure. Could it have been worse? Well, we'll get to book two. But no, I enjoyed it. I think it's fine. And yeah, well, I mean, as of recording this, I've already seen book two. So sometime in the next few days, I'll get around to book two. This is an hour long, though, so we'll see. We'll see when that happens. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I think this is pretty fine. And yeah, this may be fine, and I know things will be worse, but it'll also get better. I know it gets better. I am actually really curious to watch the third and fourth seasons again. Those are the only ones I've seen once. And I am now, having gone through the first two, which we'll talk about the second one and all of its problems. But I am genuinely curious to rewatch the third and fourth. I just started the third, starts off pretty strong. But I am curious, especially the fourth. Like, I remember people having a lot of problems with the fourth, and I know there's the controversy. But I'm genuinely curious to rewatch the fourth. But yeah, for right now, I hope you all enjoyed. Stay tuned for more. Till next time. Peace.